Welcome to First Page Fridays. I'm April Davila for Sit Right Here, and today we're going to look at somebody's first page of their novel. Presumably could be a short story, could be a memoir. We're going to look at the first 250 words. So if you are a writer, there's lots to learn here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And I will also mention that if you like this kind of feedback, this is the kind of really focused line edit that you can get if you join our 3 and 7 challenge. So I'm going to put some information on that in the description below. Check that out if you would like me to do some more focused feedback for you. All right, let's let's get to it here. We're going to start by reading through the whole thing, the whole first page. We do 250 words, which is about what fits on the first page of a novel. And then we'll jump back up to the top and we'll start editing. I always like to say that I haven't read this through yet, so bear with me if I mispronounce or I struggle with any of the wording. Let's do it. There are 10 kinds of fairies, those who can read binary and those who can't. Zora was the former, her mother, Eloise, and her brother, Farfan, definitely the latter. A branch of the living treehouse twisted down from the ceiling and dropped a few berries into Zora's cereals. She stirred them half-heartedly and glanced up. The tree was worried about her. She could feel it. But seriously, how was she supposed to eat with that amount of yelling in the background? I'm not sure why the underscore's here. That's all right, we'll roll with it. How was she supposed to eat with that amount of yelling in the background? The community built this village for the Alliance was even... Sorry, my bad. The community built this village before the Alliance was even a thing, Eloise shouted, slamming her coffee mug down hard enough to make Zora flinch. Oh, come on, that was 45 cycles ago. Farfan leapt to his feet and pounded the table. Look where we are now. The infrastructure's crumbling, the school's shut down, and the last we heard from the capital was at the Springwell Festival of 5781. That was 4 cycles ago. I know, Eloise jabbed the table with every word. That is literally the only argument you ever make, every single time. With a tiny twig, the tree nudged Zora's bowl toward her and sprinkled some roasted daisies on top. Zora rolled her eyes. She pushed the bowl away, got up, and made for the kitchen door. Zorathria, where are you going? We haven't finished breakfast yet, Eloise called after her. Zora shrugged. Study session with Mr. Weiss. Before her mother could reply, she bolted. All right. So I'm going to make certain assumptions, but we're definitely in more of a fantasy world, right? The year is 5781, or a year in the past is 5781, 4 cycles ago. Presumably we're in 5785. And I'll just say, like, right off the bat, I love the caretaking tree. This is very sweet. Like, the tree's like nudging her cereal towards her, like, don't you eat your breakfast. I find that incredibly charming. And we've got a little typo here. I'm just going to clean that up. And let's start at the top. Oh, there is Smoothies and Stardust, 10 kinds of fairies. I just jumped right into the prose. So there are 10 kinds of fairies, those who can read binary and those who can't. Now, I'm curious what the other 8 are. So I wonder if you want to start with that, because it leads to the question of, like, well, what about the other 8, right? There are 10 kinds of fairies. And then it almost feels like a joke, because those who can read binary and those who can't, that is a binary in and of itself. But it's like not quite connecting for me. Am I missing? Is it a joke? Maybe I'm missing it. I might start with, there are fairies who can read binary and there are fairies who can't. Zora was the former. So I might change that just for the sake of clarity. There are, let's do this here. There are fairies who can read binary and fairies who can't. Fairies who can't. Zora was the former, her mother. Now, again, I don't know this story, and I don't know you, talking to the author here, of what your preferences are. If it's important that 10 is up there, again, this is your story. I am just making suggestions. But for me, if you say there are 10 kinds and then you tell us 2, it feels like there's like a big hanging question mark there. So if there are more kinds, maybe you get into those later. Again, you have to make the final call on that. Zora was the former, her mother Eloise, and her brother Farfan, definitely the latter. A branch of the living treehouse. So when I was reading this the first time, I did have a moment of, we're talking about the tree, And then you say a branch of the, like my mind kind of went to like family tree. And it took me a second to realize that like this was literal, that a branch of the living treehouse twisted down from the ceiling and dropped a few berries into Zora's cereals. I'm also curious why cereals is plural. Um, I don't know. I would probably make it singular, but I'm going to leave it there because I think you were consistent about that. So that must be a thing for you. I wonder if there's a way to make this clearer. A branch of the living treehouse, like just so we don't, so that our brains, my brain, your reader's brain, doesn't connect the idea of family to tree and like think that this is more metaphorical. Not sure how. Let's see. How could we do that? Maybe even just a description would help. A green branch, or a how would you describe? I mean, I guess I'm looking for a way to describe this as like, what does it look like as it's twisting down from the ceiling? Like let's go with green. I'm picturing a green branch, but a branch is more like a green says more like shoot to me, like a shoot, or a let's see, a bark-covered branch of the living treehouse twisted down from the ceiling and dropped a few berries. I'm going to leave that description up to you, but I think a little bit of description there might help it land as a more literal description rather than figurative. I'll put bark-covered, but I don't love that. That's not great. I'll leave it up to you to decide what is the description that fits there. I also wonder there's opportunity for specificity here with the berries. Is this a world where we would recognize the berries? That might not be. If it were a real world, I'd have you describe raspberries, blueberries. What are they? If we wouldn't recognize them anyway, it's probably not as important. She stirred them half-heartedly and glanced up. The tree was worried about her. I think that's so charming. I love that. She could feel it. But seriously, how is she supposed to eat? I'm going to delete these underscores with that amount of yelling in the background. Now, the way this is set up, I was picturing the yelling happening in another room, but the rest of the writing sounds like the yelling is happening like right around her, right? They're pounding on the table. Mom notices when she gets up. So I'm with that amount of, I'm just going to make it yelling. You might even say how it, and I always have a little bit of an issue with questions too. Like when we ask questions in fiction, whenever I'm as a reader, I come across a question in fiction, this little voice in my head is like, you're the author, tell me. How, because why are you asking me? Now I know that they're not actually asking, but that's the thought that always comes to my mind. So I might edit this to be like, it was, say something like, it was impossible, but seriously, it was impossible to eat. It was impossible to eat with so much yelling, going on. And then when we jump into, so one of the things about when people are reading, it's easier on the eyes and the brain to break things up a little bit, which is why we usually break out dialogue. The community built this village before the alliance was even a thing, Eloise shouted, slamming her coffee mug down hard enough to make Zora flinch. So this is when we realize that we're actually like in the room with them, right? So I think it's okay. I think I stand by this edit of like so much yelling going on right here, right now. And then when you switch who's talking, one of the ways you can cue the reader into that is by starting a new line. Oh, come on, that was 45 cycles ago. Farfan leapt to his feet and pounded the table. Look where we are now. The infrastructure's crumbling. The school's shut down. And the last we heard from the capital was at the Springwell Festival of 57-81. That was, and then generally you use an ellipsis or a dash. So an ellipsis, and these three little dots is called an ellipsis here, means that they trail off. If you use a dash, it's that they're interrupted. And since this sounds like that was ... I'm going to leave the ellipsis. But if it's more that Eloise is interrupting him, then an M dash would be more appropriate here. Again, I'm not a copy editor, so I would leave the final decision to someone who is a copy editor, but that's my take on it. 4 cycles ago, I know, Eloise jabbed the table with every word. That is literally the only argument you ever make, every single time. And then we switch our internal narrative moves to the tree. So I would make this a new paragraph. With a tiny twig, the tree nudged Zora's bowl toward her. I love that. And sprinkled some roasted daisies on top. Again, roasted daisies. The fact that you use daisies makes me think that the flora in this world is similar. So I come back to the question of berries. If they have daisies, do they have blueberries? Do they have raspberries? If it's a flower that is not on Earth, how is it, maybe name it differently. I do like that it's roasted daisies because that's very unusual. It's not something that I wouldn't think to roast a daisy. So I like that detail. Zora rolled her eyes. She pushed the bowl away, got up, and made for the kitchen door. Zorathria, where are you going? Now, again, we've been with the tree and Zora. So when we switch back to Mom, Zorathria, where are you going? We haven't finished breakfast yet. And then we would do this. I might, there's always, and this is very much artistic choice, so you have to kind of decide where you land on this. But I like to get in the attribution of the dialogue a little before the end of the dialogue. So I might put it somewhere like that. Zorathia, Eloise called after her. That doesn't really work there. Where are you going? We haven't finished yet. And then you could come down here and say, Zora shrugged. Study session with Miss Weiss. Before her mother could reply, she bolted. Now, I would definitely keep reading this. I'm a fan of fantasy. I love something that takes place in another world. You open on some really good conflict here. So brother and mother, they can read binary. I don't know what that means yet. I'm willing to suspend that for a little while. I would like to know fairly soon what that means, that they can read binary, because for me, when someone says they can read binary, I'm thinking like coder, right? Not necessarily fairies. So at some point soon, you'll want to explain what that means. You also probably want to explain the other 8 types of fairies, because remember I deleted that 10 fairies line. Where was I going with that? Oh, right. Okay. So we've set up the tension of like Zora can't do this thing that her mother and her brother can do. I think that's a good tension to put right at the front. You introduce the magical elements of the living tree. We also get a very strong sense of being in another world because what's going on with the Alliance, the Springwell Festival, everything's shutting down, infrastructure's crumbling. So we get a sense right off the bat that this is a world where there's a lot at stake, and that Zora's family has not something to do with it, but that they're engaged as members of the community, that they have a stake in this. And even though we didn't get like Zora's age, but you like just from the narrative here, she comes off very much as like the teenager, right? She's not quite. You get the sense that the brother's old enough to be having this argument about infrastructure and things shutting down. And that maybe she's a little younger and she is kind of still in that teenage vein of like, she doesn't want to be there, right? She's first of all, she's like, I can't even eat. You guys are just annoying with your argument. And then she doesn't engage, she leaves. And I think that tells us a lot about this character. There's a lot going on around her, but she doesn't necessarily, I don't know if care is the right word, but she's not engaged in it. All right. And I think that's about everything I've got on, I guess if you're going to call it Chapter 10 Kinds of Fairies, you should get into that at some point pretty soon. Or maybe there's a part that needs to come. Maybe that first line needs to say there are 10 kind of fairies, and then tell us what the kinds are, and then get into the idea that like the last 2 is like can read binary and can't. But you don't want to open up your story with like a list. Generally speaking, there are always exceptions. I know there are some books that do it very well or have done it where they like a really engaging, interesting list. It's challenging. It's much better to drop your reader into a scene just like this one where something is happening. There are stakes. There are opinions. So I would keep the 10 kinds of fairies discussion for a little bit later into the story. This is a really solid first page. Like I said, I would definitely keep reading. I hope this was helpful both to the author and to whoever else is watching. And don't forget, you can send in your first page if you would like me to do yours. There's a link in the comments where you can send yours in. I also, as I mentioned, this is the kind of feedback that I do for people who take my 3 in 7 challenge and win it and earn themselves some feedback on up to 1,000 words. This is only 250 and a half-hour coaching call with me. So check out the link to that as well. All right. See you next time, everybody.